Leave the seal intact. I used to think digs were too full of science to be haunted. Grids staked in twine, context sheets, a generator that believes in itself. I'm 25, the night tech on a valley excavation that will be a documentary if it behaves. Rock-cut shaft, side chambers, a plastered doorway with a cartouche the epigrapher hasn't stopped smiling at. My job is simple. Back up the photogrammetry, guard the finds tent, watch the dehumidifiers, and never break a seal without 3 signatures. Extra rules from Dr. Klein. Don't go below alone. Don't answer whistles in the quarry wind. And if the tablet asks you to double tap anything after midnight, tell it no. He laughed when he said it. The laugh didn't stick. By 10:56 p.m., the site had settled into its long breath. Generator low and loyal, fans in the finds tent, the desert talking to itself like it knows you'll leave. At the tag station, the thermal printer coughed a narrow strip with no trench, no locus, just do not unseal. Along the edge, ghost gray digits that weren't our hour. 3:13 m. The camp clock said 10:57. I stuck the strip to the tablet case because paper makes rules heavier. The first odd thing was polite. 2 knuckles, tapped the aluminum table in the finds tent, measured, not wind, not the tarp settling. I lifted my headlamp. My reflection in the mylar window lagged a half beat and showed a second head behind my shoulder, tilted toward my ear, mouth, parted, like it had reached the first half of Don Hataru. I blinked until plastic remembered it was only plastic. The LiDAR tablet woke and slid a card I had in a T called Resume Chamber, Scan 313. Under it, double tap to confirm. 2 tiny hearts, pulsing like a dare, dressed as UI. I hit cancel. The card minimized and pretended it had always lived there. The base radio clicked. A voice came through slow and careful, like each word had to be lowered into place with 2 fingers. Don't open. Not Klein. Not the night guard 2 ridges over. The careful museum voice cities use when they explain rules to hands. I did the brave thing that isn't. Work, copied raws, labeled bags, locus, material, coordinates, the generator, the fans, the transformer in the field fridge, aligned into one long note that set my teeth to counting. In that held cord, the zipper of the finds tent shivered, a half-inch like a sleeper scratching, and remembered its job. I walked to the shaft mouth because legs like lies. The rope handline glowed faintly from dust. The plastered seal down the stair, reed impressions, guard stamp, had been braced with timber and unflattering respect. Cold breathed up at me the way places breathe that haven't met the weather in centuries. On the facing plaster, patch of dust bloomed into the shape of a furrow, palm, 5 long ovals, and a heel and a slid, a patient inch before thinning. I told myself condensation, like grammar, could save me in a desert. My phone vibrated where it isn't supposed to live. Unknown. Confirm entry at 313. The tiny map dot sat inside the shaft, then behind my shoulder, then under it. Double tap to confirm. With those hearts, small and patient, I turned the phone off. It stayed lit long enough to flip to 3:13. and back, like a muscle twitch in glass. At 11:19, tap it traveled the shaft timbers, measured, coming from the sealed doorway, then answering itself from the stair above me, like a person practicing punctuation. The radio breathed again, kinder. Leave the seal intact. Back in the tent, the tag printer fed a second strip, edges damp like letters that sweat. Doorway stays closed. The tablet refreshed to a screen I've never seen. Override mortar integrity. Double tap to confirm. Hearts pulsed. I killed the screen with my knuckle. It took a breath and obeyed. The epigrapher's lightbox hummed. On its glass, through my own reflection. A head leaned into my left ear, mouth parted on the first half of "Don't," then had the decency to be only my hair and a line drawing of a bird that meant a god or a word for it. Something whistled across the quarry. 2 clean notes. The exact pitch the crew uses to call water breaks. A beat late, like copy paper learning breath. I didn't answer. The wind let go of its sentence. At 11:31, the GoPros in the shaft woke themselves and synced time to a number that wasn't TUI, our hour. Their status screens hiccuped to 3.2 and back. The cold, rising from below, stroked the back of my knees like a superstition, flexing. On the braced seal, dust bloomed. Another. Palm. A thumb width, higher than any of us could blow, and slid us down until it met timber. I wrote, "Quiet night," at the top of the context notebook, because supervisors like to see that lie written cleanly. The letters looked wet a second longer than ink should. The tripod over the shaft rocked once. Not wind, pressure. I set my palm on the rope. From the dark below, pressure matched. It, polite, not pushy, like a hand through centuries, agreeing we both exist. At 11:41, the generator, the fans, the fridge, aligned again. One held note that made the tent fabric remember which way to lean. In that breath, the timber brace on the seal nudged a hair toward loose under no hand and sulked back when I said no. To stone like it had ears, my phone lit with a photo from unknown. The shaft from above my head, my own shoulders small, the plastered doorway gleaming like teeth, the caption, double tap to confirm. I pressed the power button until mercy happened. The tablet, dark, printed its will on my eyelids anyway. Resume chamber scan, 313. The hearts pulsed. The radio found a softer pitch. Don't go down. The only down from here is the step to the seal and a century of argument. At 12:06, the camp fridge popped and offered a strip on its magnet, like an old friend forgetting itself. Leave the seal. The edges were damp. In the fines tray, a shirred weed labeled C03 vibrated like a phone. I walked the perimeter because we paid for the string, and the string deserves loops. Tracks, the day's boots, were crisp. New ones, small as a child's and a little too long in the toe, ran down the edge of the grid and stood in front of the shaft, towing the drop, then vanished like planning. The steel ladder leaned in the light of my headlamp. On its rung, dust bloomed. Palm notch from below, and dust already slid a patient inch before, forgetting it was allowed to be a hand. At 12:23, the photogrammetry rig in the tent decided to announce a capture and fired a sequence at no subject. Strobe, 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 as if a body had volunteered history to be portrait. The generator dropped half a tone, The fans matched. The valley held its breath like a man who has learned to be careful. Aligned. In that chord, something word knocked twice on the timber brace. Exact, polite, the beat of my heart. The LiDAR tablet regained its courage. Start 3, 13, passage map. Double tap to confirm. The hearts waited in the corner the way small animals do. Snouts lifted for milk. You will not pour. I slid the tablet into its sleeve and zipped it like a coffin. I printed a sign because signs are spells. After midnight, no entry below. I taped it to the rope handline at the shaft. The tape breathed like a small lung and held. At 12:41, the valley decided to be choir again. Generator, fans, fridge. One note. The step down into the shaft felt colder by an idea. On the seal, the dust palm bloomed. One last time, and slid. The radio's careful voice gave me a bedtime rule. Leave the Urtus seal intact. The rest of the hour was a long negotiation with ordinary. I bagged a flake the wind had no business moving. I logged a lizard who decided the clipboard was shade. I watched the stars forget they were dead in this air. At Ura 3.13, because some hours apply for hard jobs, every device in camp blinked once and held. The GoPros, the fridge diode, the generator's panel light, the valley's hum, aligned, and let go. The timbers under my palm cooled, as if another hand had matched mine through wood, and agreed. The radio offered me its last kindness in that careful wait. Leave it sealed. The tablet forgot its hearts and remembered to be a tool. Dawn pushed the ridge into a color that means carry water. Kleine came up the wadi with coffee and the posture of a person who carries grants like children. Quiet? He asked. Mostly, I said, and slid him the damp strips. He frowned at do not unseal, like it was a policy he hadn't to written. Printer's old, he decided. The supervisor spell for mercy. He wrapped the timber brace with two knuckles like a doctor listening to a sternum. The seal answered with nothing you could invoice. We opened nothing. We took measurements at noon with 3 signatures and a camera rolling. Klein laid his hand on the plastered doorway and felt nothing but dry. On the timber, in tiny pencil, none of us could own, someone had written, "Leave the seal intact." The letters looked pressed, like a hand on the other side had pushed them up through wood. I traded nights for afternoons a month later and tell people it's for the heat. Some weeks, around R313, my apartment radiator knocks it twice, like timbers, learning manners, and the bathroom mirror fogs, a thumb width higher than I can reach, while a palm clears a coin and Dio slides. A patient inch. My phone lights with unknown, confirm entry, and 2 small hearts that wait nicely. When it does, I keep my hands off doors that lasted longer than our names. I don't double tap anything that pretends to love me. I don't go down without witnesses, signatures, daylight. In the steady voice the valley taught me, I say, leave the seal intact. For a long, thin moment, the room hums one note, like a dig pretending to be a choir. A head leans near my left ear and practices the first half of Ur, Don Ta. And then the pipes remember water. The hour lets go of its borrowed number, and whatever was learning my hand, a half beat through plaster, chooses someone else, S threshold, and leaves mine to maps, tags, and a doorway that is allowed to be a wall.
If you survived this far, leave your like to prove you are not afraid.